Welcome to the Unlist. Guess what time it is? Fall fragrances time. I'm super happy because this is literally my favorite time of year. Fall or autumn is my favorite time of year. Starting maybe a week or two after my birthday on the 15th and extending all the way until maybe like early December, mid-December, whenever it officially becomes winter. Fall is hands down everywhere I lived in my life, which is only actually two locations, East Coast and West. I've always enjoyed fall the most. And it's just because this particular time of year is when you start to leave behind the muggy, nasty, or sun-blasted hellscape that is summer. And I've not really enjoyed summers where I grew up in Maryland, where it's super humid, nor have I really enjoyed them up here where you get like 2 months of uninterrupted sun and it's like just heat blasted sidewalks and streets. And because the humidity up here is not as high as it is down where I'm from, you just get like the sun becomes a deadly laser basically onto you, and it sucks. I'm not a fan. So I've just come to the determination in my life that I don't like summer. I like leading up to summer, so maybe like June, early July, then like last half of July all the way through to the first half of September. I could skip it. I would just do like a TiVo and go zoop right past it if I could. Or just move somewhere else for 2 months and then come back. But I'm not rich, so I don't have the luxury of a summer vacation home further north or something, right? I don't have that ability. Anyway, because I love fall so much, I also tend to love fall fragrances the most. This is the time of year where I get to basically match the weather with fragrances that enhance the aesthetic of fall. So the smell of weather turning, the chill in the air returning, segueing from t-shirt weather to sweater, hoodie, or jacket weather, and just having fragrances that pair with that vibe, leaves falling, the smell of spices, as people start doing things like making pumpkin pies and apple pies, that whole vibe. The very early beginnings of smelling wood fire smoke from people who have fireplaces, it's just the best, okay? If you're a fan of summer or spring or dead of winter, that's cool, we can be friends, but for me, fall will always be tops. Just that whole thing, that escape from the heat, moving into cooler weather, but not so cold that you're like this. It's just perfect. And the thing is, I don't like spring as much as I like fall, because spring is that in reverse. Spring is leaving behind the cool weather, the jacket weather. And even though it's cool seeing things sprout and, flowers bloom and trees get their leaves back, that's all great too. But it's all just foreshadowing the hellscape to come within a month or two's time. You see my point? So it's like, yeah, spring is kind of the equal opposite of fall, and it's cool seeing everything come back to life. But then I know in another month or so, it's misery. And that's what I don't like. It's the whole existential dread of, oh, it's going to get really miserable outside now. Even though right now it's cool. Where fall is that in reverse. Fall is the respite, the escape from that, into something that's a little more manageable for me personally. My temperature, my climate preferences, okay, is the moving into colder versus moving into warmer. Anyhow, I've done enough blabbing about that. Let's get on with it. My favorite fall fragrances. Well, for me, the scents I like to pair with fall weather, with hot coffee, with fireplace smoke, with falling leaves, with spices, usually fall into one of several categories. I like wearing leathers, I like wearing tobaccos, I like wearing mossy fragrances. And when I say mossy fragrances, I don't mean fragrances that have, from a compositional standpoint, a lot of oak moss or Averni prunastri. I'm talking about the scent of oak moss, the oak moss from the aesthetic standpoint. So really mossy fragrances are fragrances that evoke images of oak moss in the mind. May not necessarily be from a compositional point of view very heavily laid with actual oak moss. They might use vernal. They might use other materials, okay, different wood materials, different herbs to create the image, the smell of moss growing on an oak tree, right? That's just how that's how perfumery works. It's all about making mental images with smell, okay? Now, most of the fragrances I find to be very mossy do contain lots of oak moss, so it usually ends up being one leads to the other, but I just want you guys to know that a very mossy fragrance in smell doesn't necessarily need to contain a lot of actual oak moss, okay? So, and there are fragrances I will name which fit that bill, actually. Then last but not least, you know, we have the leathers, like I said, the tobaccos, the mossy fragrances, and then of course there is patchouli. Patchouli fragrances I've spoken a lot about. I've done video on Givenchy Gentleman recently. I've done video on the patchouli material itself. So I don't want to dwell too much on that here. It just feels like I'm beating a dead horse, right? But the patchouli fragrances do go into high rotation this time of year. So that is also something that I look forward to. Now, for me, if I want to smell like falling leaves, if I want to smell like walking through a forest, there aren't too many better fragrances out there than fragrances such as Caron's Yatagan from 1976. Okay, Vincent Marcello created that fragrance, and it is just literally a walk in the woods in fall for me. It has a castoreum-based leather accord in it. It has a very strong emphasis on cedarwood. It also has a strong emphasis on patchouli, surprise, surprise. It has a lot of very stiff herbal notes. Some of these herbal notes are actually controversial for some people. There are folks out there who think that Yatagan smells like celery. I personally don't see the celery myself. To me, it's oregano because it is actually oregano, but I understand where you're coming from, okay? I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that I don't see it. Kind of like the folks who, when they taste cilantro, they think it's soap. It's the same thing. I don't taste the soap. I just taste the cilantro or the coriander, whatever. Okay, so Yatagan is definitely one of my all-time favorites for that whole walk in the woods feeling. But, you know, next to that, we have some things like Jean-Franco Fair for Man, came out in 1986, so about a decade later. That fragrance could also qualify as a very mossy fragrance because it does have a weapons grade dose of oak moss. It is a very stiff, conservative, Italian gentleman's, you know, citrus aromatic sheep. So it's basically a Monsieur de Givenchy or a Moustache or something like that, but on steroids. Whereas those fragrances, they really live more in the citrus notes than they do in anything else. The base is just there to keep it on your skin. With the Jean-Franco Fair, they basically cranked up the oak moss, the sandalwood. All those materials really got turned to 11, like Spinal Tap's amps. So even though you do pass through bergamot and you pass through some other herbal facets, you really just get slammed in the face with a wall of woods and mosses. That's kind of what's going on with that fragrance. A little bit of slightly urinous citrus up top, but it's really just all about woods, moss, woods. And well, that's a forest, right? Woods and moss is a forest. So it might be a little too dry for some people, might be a little too sharp, too acrid, depending on your tastes. But if you're like me and you're a sucker for that kind of thing, then Jean-Franco Fair for Men is kind of the perfect fall fragrance right alongside Yatagan. Then there's going to be a rare bird. A rare bird in our midst, a little more expensive, a little harder to find. It's been off the market for probably decades now, and it's the original version of Gucci Pour Homme. Not the version of Gucci Pour Homme from 2002, and not the version of Gucci Pour Homme that would effectively just be Gucci by Gucci, rebranded as Gucci Pour Homme. It is not any of those. It is the original 1976 Gucci Pour Homme, composed by Guy Robert is the perfumer of that one. And it is another citrus aromatic sheep, but it doubles down on the woody components. It doubles down on the oak moss. Now it does play around a bit with a little dose of tonka. Okay, it's got some fougere adjacent qualities, but it is mostly a sheep, and it will come across with the labdanum, the oak moss, the patchouli, but what you're going to really focus on is the sandalwood in that fragrance. The sandalwood's going to come out the most, but everything else layered around it creates that very mossy, thick, heavy, again, walk in the woods, all right? Now, probably the biggest moss beast I've ever smelled in my life. So moss, it actually smells dank and mildewy. That's how mossy it is. And this is another Italian fragrance. Surprise, surprise. The Italians love their oak moss. So, you know, no wonder a lot of vintage guys love Italian fragrances because they're of a similar mind. And this is another obscure fragrance from 1986. So once again, we're back to 86. But instead of Gianfranco Fair, we're going to be discussing Roberto Capucci's little-known fragrance called R. de Capucci. R. de Capucci from 1986 is basically the smell of shoving your face into an oak tree. It is quite literally so mossy, so dank, it almost smells like, you know, damp rid that's been used up, needs to be thrown away. It is just uber, super duper mossy, and it has fir balsam in it. It has, again, a lot of herbs in it, a lot of garrigue notes, and it is just so double and triple concentrated on the mossy aspects of the structure. Has pine as well, that, you know, I've had friends when I've worn this fragrance, and they're like, you know, did you just come out of a garden or something? Were you like playing with potting soil? Like they actually think it's something from the earth, like it's something from a tree. Like they don't realize it's a fragrance that I sprayed on myself. That's the intensity of R. de Capucci. And again, fits right in with fall. So I love it. Now, moving on to my other leather tobacco choices. There's a couple of them. One of them is going to be Michael by Michael Kors. That is a lovely fall fragrance. It's sort of a boozy tobacco leather hybrid. It's got isobutylquinoline in it. Okay, it's got some plum notes. It's got some tobacco notes. It's a bit sour. It's a bit fruity. It is a very interesting, complex fragrance composed by Harry Fremont, one of my favorite perfumers. Sadly, also discontinued. A lot of these on this list, unfortunately, are discontinued. So fall is discontinued, basically. Designer perfumery does not want you to be able to have fall in a fragrance. All they want is endless summer, okay? All the fruity stuff, all the fresh stuff, all the ocean stuff, all the sweet stuff. They do not want you to have any fall fragrances. They've gotten rid of all of them. Sorry, you can't have it. Not my choice, their choice. It sucks, but it is the way it is. Moving right along from that, there is Montana. Parfum Dome. It sounds, it's Homme, but it's with a D, so it's Dome. It's ridiculous. French is ridiculous sometimes. Parfum Dome, like the Thunderdome. Okay, are we going to the Parfum Dome now? But anyway, it's the original Montana men's fragrance. It comes in a red box. It has a bottle that kind of looks like Devil's Peak from Close Encounters, so the third kind, you know, kind of comes up like this. Has a little like a ziggurat stagger to it. Except you're not going to get a flying saucer coming down over your bottle of Montana. It's not going to happen. You're not going to have to go, ba, 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 you know. You don't need to do that. You can just spray it and you're good. But it is a floral sort of fougere adjacent tobacco. A lot of people compare the Montana to Havana by Aramis, but I think Havana by Aramis is a sharper, spicier, boozier, more summery fragrance. It reminds me of the Cuba Libre, basically, in wearable form. They are of a similar stripe, I agree, but the Montana is way more floral, way rounder, a little bit sweeter, okay, has a little more with the Tonka going on. It doesn't rely as much on the bay rum notes because there really aren't any in this fragrance. And if you like that floral, dandy sort of tobacco, it just smells real cozy, you know. Again, this is more of an indoor fall fragrance. It's really one that I would check out. Next up from that, since we're keeping in the tobacco theme, is going to be an artisanal fragrance. Actually, there are two of these artisanal fragrances that I like. The first one is a Darren Allen fragrance called Devil's Share. It's the smell of whiskey and tobacco and wood and vanilla. It's got a slightly animalic twist to it, a little bit of an animalic musk profile way in the base, so it doesn't smell too commercial. You know, a lot of people, when they smell this fragrance, they come off going, oh, this is kind of like, you know, a 1 million-ish fragrance. And I'm like, no, it's not, because once you let it dry down and it gets down to business, it gets down to brass tacks, it gets way more rustic, more animalic, okay? It gets way more dark in nature than any commercial tobacco fragrance ever could that I've smelled, okay? So Devil's Share, check it out. It's worthwhile. It's got a bit of a cocoa note too, actually, going on. It's kind of interesting. The other one is from another artisanal brand called Clandestine Laboratories, and this one I like to wear a lot. I didn't have this one last fall, so this will be the first fall I get to really enjoy it. It's called Orpheus, and Orpheus is almost like a transparent tobacco fragrance. It's a tobacco lake that's been made see-through somehow. It's very transparent, okay, very just sort of effluent. It kind of moves around you. It's got some spice, a little bit of sweetness. The tobacco notes are in it. A little bit of a Coca-Cola vibe. It kind of pops, effervescent, all right? Very light, but it's still substantial, and you will smell it in the chill fall air. It's perfect, actually. Now, on from that, one more. This is moving more into the patchouli side of things, but it's a little appreciated fragrance. It's from a house that no one really talks about called Alford and Hoff. And it's just the eponymous Alford and Hoff fragrance. Now, it's been retroactively renamed number 1, Alford and Hoff 1, because they've made a 2 and they've made a 3. But originally it was just Alford and Hoff. It was the only fragrance they had, so they didn't give it a name. It became number 1 only through the existence of 2 and 3. But this one has a wood cap. The juice is an amber color, and it basically smells like a mixture of patchouli, apple pie, and tobacco. It's lovely. It's literally like fall in a bottle, but again, an indoor representation. You're in like maybe your grandparents' house, and grandpa's smoking a pipe, grandma's making an apple pie, and you can smell all the other materials, you know, the wood floors, and the patchouli just kind of adds to the aromatic element of it. It's a fantastic fragrance, and it's perfect for fall weather. Now, moving further into the patchouli side of things, Givenchy Gentleman gets a lot of wear this time of year for me. Giorgio Beverly Hills for Men also gets a lot of wear for me. I don't have to describe them. I've already talked enough about them, so we'll skip those. Just so you know, they're on this list, okay? I'm talking about them in this video as perfect fall fragrances. Amen is another one. Thierry Mugler, sadly discontinued now. Amen. You know, it's a coffee house fragrance, in my opinion. It has coffee, has patchouli, has cedarwood, wood floors, a little bit of vanilla in there. It's interesting. It's cool. It gives you the autumn vibe that I like. And then that's it, you know, for the patchouli stuff. I mean, sometimes I will wear a couple of patchouli things that aren't necessarily patchouli subject fragrances, like Opium Pour Homme gets a little bit of use this time of year. Although I think it's more of a winter fragrance in my opinion, but I do wear it a little bit this time of year. Also, I like to mess around a little bit with Mon Patchouli by Raymond Monagal, another artisanal sort of niche brand. A little bit fruitier though. Mon Patchouli is one that I can kind of wear really whenever I want. It's more of a night out kind of fragrance, but it gets some fall use. It does. So that's really it for the patchouli stuff, and I've tackled all of the tobaccos, a little bit of the leather fragrances, the oak moss fragrances were covered. I can circle back and discuss a couple more leather scents I enjoy wearing this time of year. One of them is Moschino. Moschino Pour Homme gets a lot of use in fall. It's a very spicy leather. It's kind of like the rebellious bad boy younger brother of Bellamy. If you like Bellamy, but you wish Bellamy was a little bit spikier, a little bit spicier, a little more musky, you know, a little more animalic, you know, like I said, a little naughtier. If you want a naughtier version of Bellamy, then Moschino Pour Homme is what you want. 1990 is when that came out. Again, like most of these, I'm not trying to make this whole video about discontinued fragrances, but it just seems to be that everything I name that's perfect for this time of year is all invariably discontinued. Yatagan being the exception, you can still buy Yatagan, but the rest of them are kind of all gone, and it's sad. Again, it's like the designer industry has decided no more fall, okay? only summer, only endless summer fragrances all year round. It's bizarre. I hope it changes, but it's not my choice to make. And that's basically it, guys. I think I've covered enough of my, my favorite fall fragrances. A couple of vetiver fragrances, which also double as springtime fragrances, they kind of get a little bit more sneaked into the rotation. So vetiver is one of those things that you can also do it in spring. You can do it, and it's a good transitional subject. Okay, so Guerlain vetiver gets used quite a bit. Terre d'Hermes Eau Intense vetiver, which is a more of a peppery, woody vetiver, but still, that one gets used. Encre Noir gets tossed out a bit more this time of year. But honestly, the entire Terre d'Hermes range, from the original to the Parfum, to the Eau Intense vetiver, to the Eau Givre, all of those are great in fall. The older summer one that's not around anymore, the Eau Très Fresh, that one's not so great in fall. Eau Très Fresh you might want to skip for fall, but the rest of them, they also work tremendously well. And that's it, guys. I'm wrapping it up here. Hopefully you enjoyed my little sporadic, diarrhea verbiage of fall fragrances and my enthusiasm, my intense enthusiasm for this time of year. I just love it. I love hoodies. Okay, I love Halloween is right around the corner. Once we enter spooky month, I will do a video on spooky fragrances, gothic fragrances. Y'all can agree or disagree with me on those choices once I put that out. So I'm foreshadowing that. Most good horror movies always foreshadow anyway. So I am doing as a good horror movie would do, and I am foreshadowing the creation of a spooky Halloween themed video where you're just going to see my face. So maybe I'll try and be scarier. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, this has been my fall 2023 video. Hopefully you enjoyed it once again, and I am bowing out. So here I go.